Some people speak of their mothers with warmth and reverence. Others fall silent, not from indifference, but from exhaustion. The mother wound is the imprint left when love becomes conditional, chaotic, or controlling. It's the ache that hides beneath sentences like, "She did her best." It's what happens when the person who taught you love also taught you to doubt your worth. This wound is not about blame. It's about the inheritance of unmet needs and the patterns you learned to survive them. We are shaped by how we were mothered and how she was too. The mother wound begins in attachment, in those early wordless moments when a child reaches for comfort and finds unpredictability instead. Sometimes it comes as criticism masked as care, sometimes as enmeshment disguised as devotion, sometimes it is outright absence, perfectionism, martyrdom, rage. The child adapts by shrinking, pleasing, or performing, learning to be good instead of real, that love is something to earn. Softness becomes unsafe. In trauma-informed therapy, we see this not as pathology, but as protection. The nervous system learning to survive a love that doesn't feel safe. In the work of inner child healing, the mother wound rarely shows up as a clear memory. It lives in the body, in the softening that happens too quickly, the shrinking before conflict, the reflex to soothe others so you don't lose connection. It hides in the quiet belief that says, "I must not upset anyone or I won't be loved." On the surface, life may look steady. You're capable, competent, emotionally aware, but inside the younger self is still scanning for signs of disapproval, still working to stay good, easy, unproblematic enough to be loved. Common adult echoes include chronic people-pleasing and over-attunement to others, fear of upsetting someone or being too much, difficulty setting or holding boundaries, taking responsibility for other people's emotions, collapsing your needs to maintain connection, anxiety around conflict, or being perceived as difficult, choosing partners who replicate inconsistency, criticism, or emotional volatility. Every mother wound carries hidden commandments. I must be good to be loved. My feelings make people uncomfortable. Care means control. Other women are not safe. You may feel it in your body before you can name it. The shallow breath before speaking truth, the tightening in your stomach when someone asks what you need, the guilt that follows saying no. The mother wound is not just psychological, it's physiological. It lives in the nervous system, in the constant scanning for approval, in the guilt that flares when you finally rest. The child adapts by shrinking, pleasing, or performing, learning to be good instead of real. Love becomes something to earn. Softness becomes unsafe. In trauma-informed emotional recalibration therapy, we see this not as pathology, but as protection. The nervous system learning to survive love that didn't feel safe. For many, the mother was there, but not with you. She may have provided, cared, organised, even said the right things, yet something essential never arrived. Emotional attunement. This is what I call the invisible inheritance. It doesn't always come through chaos or criticism. It hides in the subtle moments, the times you reached for comfort and met overwhelm, dismissal, or a change of subject. Inner child healing reveals these patterns again and again, not just in memory, but through the body, the breath you hold to stay agreeable, the tightening in your stomach when someone asks what you need, the guilt that rises the moment you rest, the instinct to soften, shrink, or appease to keep the peace. These are not personality traits. They are survival strategies learned in the presence of emotional inconsistency, the nervous system shaping itself around a mother who could not consistently meet your emotional world. When a mother is unpredictable, intrusive, or emotionally engulfing, the child absorbs the inconsistency as instruction. Love must be managed, connection must be maintained, my needs are secondary or dangerous. Over time, this becomes a nervous system blueprint. The vagus nerve learns to track danger even in quiet rooms. Over-attunement replaces attunement. Hyper-awareness replaces ease. What looks like empathy is often survival. You learned to read moods before words, soothe others before you ever spoke, anticipate needs no one expressed, take responsibility for everyone's emotional weather long before you ever entered romance. You learned to fall in love with potential, to stay loyal to inconsistency, to confuse intensity with intimacy, mistake self-abandonment for love. Your system repeats what it learned in childhood. Stay small to stay safe, stay agreeable to stay connected. Reach for what feels familiar even when it hurts. Healing begins when we name what was once unspoken, when we stop minimizing emotional inconsistency as she did her best, she meant well, or it wasn't that bad. When we finally meet the child within who learned to earn love through goodness, quietness, and self-erasure, still waiting for a mother's gaze that says, your needs are not a burden. You are allowed to exist as you are. Through emotional recalibration therapy, we bring regulation back into that early space, teaching the body that love doesn't require shrinking, pleasing, or prediction. That connection can be steady, that rest is safe, that truth does not risk abandonment. This is how engulfment becomes breathing room, how inconsistency becomes internal safety. Not because she changes, but because you finally come home to yourself. Inner child healing teaches us that the body remembers long after the mind minimizes. When a mother's presence is inconsistent, overwhelming, or emotionally unpredictable, the child's nervous system interprets that instability as threat and learns to track danger even in calm. Over-attunement replaces attunement. The body lives in mild hypervigilance, always sensing, fixing, rescuing. Without reliable attunement, the body doesn't learn safety. It learns management. It learns to monitor, soften, adapt, appease. This is how emotional inconsistency becomes a physiological blueprint. A child's system wired for co-regulation reorganizes itself around keeping the peace. The breath tightens before expressing a need. The stomach clenches at the slightest hint of disapproval. The body prepares to soothe others before it even recognizes its own feelings. What we later call high empathy is often the residue of hypervigilance. What we call guilt is the echo of early enmeshment. What we call people-pleasing is the muscle memory of shrinking to stay safe. And what we call losing ourselves in relationships is the nervous system following the oldest rule it ever learned: disappear a little or lose love entirely. None of this is weakness. It's physiology. The nervous system doesn't remember stories, it remembers patterns. It holds every silent moment of, I learned to smile instead of cry. I swallowed my feelings to keep the peace. I softened myself so she wouldn't pull away. I stayed small so I wouldn't be too much. The mother wound rarely begins with one woman. It moves quietly through a lineage of women who were taught that self-sacrifice is virtue, that silence keeps the peace, that softness is dangerous, and that their own needs are a threat to love. Most mothers who struggled to attune were once daughters themselves, carrying the imprint of their own unmet needs. They brought their unmothered selves into motherhood, doing the best they could with the emotional tools they were given, often while holding pain they never had space to name. The matriarchal wound is a lineage of women praised for endurance, punished for boundaries, expected to give without receiving, to care quietly while disappearing. This conditioning becomes the family's emotional script, a language of overfunctioning, guilt and self-erasure. And so the wound repeats until someone names it, until someone stops shrinking, until someone refuses to inherit the silence. When you begin to heal, you are not betraying your mother. You are releasing both of you from the story you were born into. Our mothers were not born overwhelmed, overgiving, or afraid of their own needs. They were shaped by a world that rewarded self-denial and punished emotional truth. The tragedy is that this conditioning robbed both mother and child of authentic connection. Generations of women learned to love while collapsing their boundaries, to nurture without receiving, to carry the weight of everyone else's emotions except their own. When we begin to heal, we do more than soothe our inner child. We interrupt the cultural expectation that women must disappear to be loved. We start to redefine feminine energy as self-trust, not self-sacrifice, as emotional clarity, not compliance. And in doing so, we offer ourselves and every daughter who comes after us permission to stand fully in who we are without shrinking, softening, or silencing our truth. Inner child healing helps us trace this matriarchal lineage with compassion, not shame. We learn to see the mother wound not as a personal flaw in us or in her, but as an emotional inheritance we now have the capacity to lay down. In this work, we don't excuse the inconsistency, but we understand its origins. We stop waiting for nurturing from someone who never received it herself and begin offering it to the parts of us that were left holding the ache. This is how generational patterns end, not through blame, but through awareness, not through perfection, but through presence. By learning to give ourselves the emotional safety we once compensated for, we become the first in our lineage to experience love without self-erasure, and from that reclamation, a new pattern begins. For a long time, I believed gentleness would always come at a cost. That warmth would melt into control the moment I let my guard down. Many years ago, my daughter was delivered by cesarean. I poured my heart out to the woman caring for me. My body was exhausted, my mind frayed from 2 years with a cruel man who'd been arrested just days before. Good, because he was gone. Terrible, because I was about to lose my home. She listened with such grace. I could feel her compassion move through me. You could say it was just her job. But after a long shift, after cleaning wounds and tending to every indignity of recovery, she came back. She sat on my bed, and in a warm voice from the sunshine, she said, "I'm right here, dear. Let me hold you." I laid my head on her generous, enormous boobs and sobbed. She held me and she didn't let go. Even when I protested, she must be tired. Even when I tried to make it easy for her to leave, she simply held me until I was finished. I truly believe I was sent an angel of grace. I have never felt so loved without judgment or more held in the sanctity of womanhood. I always keep that present in my heart when I am sitting in this privileged space of healing. Because of her, I try to give back when I can, and I remember we are here to heal one another. This is the heart of healing the mother wound, learning to trust the feminine again, beginning with your own. The feminine was never meant to be submission or domination. It is both root and river, steady and flowing, intuitive and fierce. To heal the mother wound is to reclaim this wholeness, to become a woman who is neither frozen nor frantic, who can nurture without disappearing, who can lead without control. You begin to see other women not as rivals but as reflections. The more you honour your own softness, the safer the world feels for every woman around you. Every personal mother wound sits inside a wider cultural script. Behind so many overwhelmed, inconsistent, or emotionally unpredictable mothers stands a system that taught women to serve, not to rest, to care for others but never themselves. This is the matriarchal wound, the cultural conditioning that confuses obedience with goodness, silence with safety, and self-sacrifice with love. It tells women that boundaries are selfish, that ambition is dangerous, that their worth is measured by how much they endure. It praises them for emotional labour while denying them emotional support. And so entire generations learned to love through overgiving, to nurture through fear, to parent while disappearing, and to mistake self-abandonment for devotion. What we internalized as personal inadequacy was often a symptom of collective conditioning. Our mothers were not born anxious, self-sacrificing, or emotionally unpredictable. They were shaped by a world that rewarded compliance and punished authenticity. The tragedy is that this distortion robbed both mother and child of safety, softness, and honest connection. A lineage of women learned to love while suppressing their own needs. And we inherited the ache of that imbalance. When we begin to heal, we don't just soothe our own nervous system, we interrupt a generational script. We start to redefine feminine energy as truth, not tolerance, as self-honouring, not self-erasing. We give ourselves and every daughter who comes after us permission to take up space, to have needs, to be whole. Not every mother becomes inconsistent or engulfing by choice. Some live in the shadow of a dominating partner, silenced, controlled, or emotionally worn down, too frightened or conditioned to protect their children in the way they longed to. Others become enforcers of that very system that oppressed them, repeating the criticism, rigidity, or emotional withdrawal they once endured themselves. Even as part of them aches with the conflict. For the child, this dynamic cuts just as deep. It creates a painful split where the person who might comfort you is also the one who collapses, freezes, or turns away. Safety becomes unstable because the danger is twofold, one loud and overpowering, the other quiet and unavailable. The nervous system learns early that comfort is unpredictable, connection is conditional, and the safest place is often inside yourself. And in a child healing, this is where we meet one of the deepest wounds, the loss of safety in both archetypes. The mother who wounds through inconsistency, engulfment or collapse, and the father who cannot intervene, cannot protect or cannot emotionally attune. The body learns that love must be managed, that truth is dangerous, that connection requires self-abandonment. Silence becomes survival. Hyper-attunement becomes identity. For daughters, this often becomes a blueprint of relational confusion, a pull towards caregiving mixed with resentment, a longing for nurture tangled with fear of being consumed, a tendency to choose partners they can heal while distrusting those who offer steady intimacy. She may gravitate towards emotionally complex men, seeking safety through fixing or finding herself shrinking beside partners who mirror her mother's unpredictability in subtler ways. For sons, the imprint often manifests as emotional self-erasure, the instinct to appease, to stabilize, to overfunction, the belief that expressing needs risks destabilizing the environment. He may become the quiet caretaker, the conflict-averse partner, the man who feels responsible for everyone's emotional weather, while having no language for his own. This is a wound of identity distortion, of what happens when the feminine is silenced, overburdened, or expected to disappear. Healing it asks us to reimagine mother energy, not as sacrifice, compliance, or emotional overflow, but as truth, grounded, attuned, boundaried, and whole. Through emotional recalibration therapy, we restore the forgotten qualities of the feminine: intuition without fear, care without self-erasure, softness without collapse, boundaries without guilt. We teach the nervous system that safety isn't found in shrinking or pleasing, but in clarity, that connection does not require self-abandonment, that love can nurture without engulfing, and presence can be warm without being porous. The ache of an unpredictable or emotionally unavailable mother is not just about what was missing. It's about the longing for a safety that flickered on and off without warning. It is the grief of mixed signals and blurred memories, of loving someone you could never fully reach, of craving a steadiness your nervous system still waits for even now. In inner child healing, this is often where the deepest mourning begins. Not for the mother herself, but for the child you might have been if you had been attuned to, believed, comforted and seen. It's the moment when the adult self realizes she has spent years trying to be good enough, easy enough, quiet enough, still working to earn a love that should have been consistent from the start. You may find yourself longing for the version of a mother who never arrived, or replaying stories where she finally softens, finally sees you, finally stays steady instead of shifting. You may still search for her emotional presence in partners, friends, mentors, hoping someone will offer the warmth, attunement, or reassurance your younger self needed to feel safe. But the healing begins when you allow yourself to grieve the mother you imagined, not the mother you had. To name the dream of perfect nurture for what it was, a child's survival strategy. To stop waiting for her to become someone she was never allowed, supported, or able to be, and to turn toward the parts of you still trying to earn love through shrinking, soothing, or over-giving. Through emotional recalibration therapy, this grief becomes sacred work, a rewiring of the feminine nervous system, a restoration of boundaries, a remembering that closeness does not require self-erasure. We cannot rewrite the past, but we can rewrite the meaning we made from it. We can learn that what was inconsistent once was no longer determined We can learn that what was inconsistent no longer has to determine what we tolerate. You can grieve the mother you never had, and you can still become the woman you were always meant to be, whole, seen, and finally at home in your own belonging. Healing the mother wound is not about rewriting the past. It's about releasing the beliefs you built in order to survive it. It's remembering that your worth was never meant to hinge on being easy, quiet, pleasing, or small. In inner child healing, we don't try to fix the younger self. We reparent her. We meet her where she learned to disappear, soft, vigilant, hopeful, still trying to earn the love she deserved without effort. And we teach her what safety feels like now. We breathe where she once held tension in her belly and throat. We express the needs she once swallowed. We give her the boundaries she never saw modelled, not through fantasy, but through embodied self-honouring. We show her slowly and consistently that connection does not require self-abandonment, that love can be steady, that she can be steady. At some point, the focus turns inward, from healing her to embodying you. You realise that the mother you've been seeking is already alive within your nervous system, waiting to be remembered. We heal the mother wound not by changing her, but by becoming the woman our younger self needed. This is the final act of reparenting, to hold your own heart the way you once wished to be held, to offer yourself protection, presence and peace daily, quietly, without apology. That is emotional sovereignty. That is feminine wholeness. That is the recalibrated heart. The mother wound forms when a child grows up with inconsistent emotional safety, when love is tied to compliance, perfection, or silence. As adults, it shows up as guilt, people-pleasing, difficulty receiving care, or mistrust of women. Inner child healing reveals where those early adaptations still run the show, and emotional recalibration therapy helps the body to unlearn them. The mother wound affects relationships by creating patterns of over-functioning, emotional caretaking, or attraction to partners who mirror the early emotional bond, unpredictable, critical, or avoidant. Healing reteaches the nervous system that love can feel calm, mutual, and safe. Healing the mother wound isn't about blaming our mothers. Many people struggle with this, especially because society pits the shame of your personal truth against the iconic fantasy of a perfect woman. Healing isn't about blame, it's about liberation. It's about the inheritance of unmet needs and the patterns you learned to survive them. We are shaped by how we were mothered and by how she was too. We can honour their humanity while releasing the parts of their pain we no longer need to carry. Healing the mother wound begins when we stop trying to perfect ourselves into worthiness and start listening to the parts of the body that learn to stay small to stay safe. Inner child healing teaches the nervous system that love doesn't require self-erasure, that truth, needs and boundaries do not threaten connection. This is the beginning of self-belonging, the moment we stop earning love through compliance and start receiving it through authenticity. If watching this video has resonated with you, my trauma-informed 6-week immersion combines hypnotherapy, somatic practice, and inner child work to restore regulation and rebuild self-trust. It teaches your body that safety no longer depends on control, that love and calm can coexist. Please feel welcome to book a discovery call. I work both in person and online. You don't have to carry this alone. You're not too much. You're not broken. You're becoming. Thank you for watching.